Okay, there's our announcement. So as I mentioned, I'm Kelly Schneider and we have Don Alon here with me. This presentation training is going to be on the same day on-demand transportation service, which is provided by Johnson County Seats. Okay, here's Don and I. What's that? Oh, I think it was maybe just some background noise. Okay. I cannot see your faces anymore. So if anybody, needs to pop back in, just let me know. Okay, so I'm Kelly. I am the mobility coordinator. So I work over here in the social services department for the county. My role is to connect people to transportation resources. So I've been working on this project and kind of connecting people to the project that maybe aren't working with one of the human service agencies in the area. And then we have Don, and Don, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep. So my name is Dawn Alam. I've been working for Seats for 14 years now. My official title is Transportation and Fleet Supervisor. I wear lots of different hats, but one of them is managing some of the projects that we have going on at Seats. And so this is one of the things I'm working on.
Perfect. So this is how we're going to lay things out today. We hope to get this squeezed into an hour, but it is possible that we may just go a bit over. If that does happen, I have everybody's email addresses from registration. So we'll definitely make sure to send out the slide deck and the recording of the training in case there's anything you missed, and you're welcome and encouraged to share this with those that you work with. Okay, so this is what's on the menu and kind of how we'll lay things out, and we'll go ahead and get started with the background. So the same day on-demand service really was an opportunity that came up from COVID relief funds. So more specifically, the ARPA funds, as we call it, the American Rescue Act. And what these funds did is it allowed the county to start a new service and allow Seats to still offer that door-to-door service, but for those that maybe aren't paratransit riders or don't have paratransit yet, and find themselves in situations where they don't have an alternative form of transportation. So the idea behind this service was to fill those gaps within the county. And that's really what we've been focusing on since the project started in the summer. So as an overview, the project does operate anywhere within Johnson County. We'll talk about the referral process, but once you do have that referral, you can use the service to go anywhere within the county for any reason. We're not asking you what your travel needs really are. That's up to the discretion of the rider to make that determination. The service is currently running Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And rides are booked directly with the driver, which we recognize is a really different way of doing transportation service. So we'll kind of talk through that a little bit as we go. And just as a note, there will be no rides that are taking place on county holidays. Okay, so who's eligible for this? So this service, as I mentioned, is really designed to fill the transportation gaps. So first and foremost, this service is to serve those that live outside of the public transit coverage area or are traveling to those fixed route or areas that aren't served by the fixed route transit systems. So it doesn't matter your mobility type or your age or what your travel reason is, but if you find that your needs are unmet by the fixed route systems, we can transition you to use this new same day service. And also I should have said, you don't have to hit all of these eligibility bullets. It could just be one, although we have found that a lot of people do fall into more than one category. So examples that I like to use for that very first bullet point are folks that live in Western Hills, which is a mobile home community on the outskirts of Coralville. So it's technically within City of Coralville city limits, but the nearest bus stop is at the Coralville Mall, and it's just absolutely unsafe for people. It's really far, but it's also really unsafe for people to be expected to walk over that way. So that's one of the areas that we can kind of target, along with several others, but that's just an example to use. That can also be flip-flop. So if, let's say, there's a person in the urbanized area where there is coverage and they want to travel to a location that's not on the bus route, an example I like to use is the Johnson County Historic Poor Farm. So that's on the very west end of Melrose, and is, again, very, very far and not safe for pedestrian travel to get there. So if anybody wanted to travel to the Poor Farm and did not have transportation, they could sign up to use this same day service. All right, the next bullet point that we have is individuals that are applying for and awaiting paratransit approval. So by the looks of the roster, I imagine some of you have completed the paratransit application before, and all of its lovely dozens of pages. Once that application takes quite some time. The writer themselves has to fill out the assessment, and then a medical professional has to fill out part of that. So that act of getting those pages filled out on your end and then transferring it to a medical professional kind of takes some time. And then once it's actually turned in, the transit systems by law are allowed 21 days to process those applications. So what we've seen is there's a lot of times where people may have travel needs during that period of time. So in the case of our same day project, we're offering them temporary approval until they actually officially get that paratransit status. And I will say that this is one of those that may be helpful to connect those that you serve with, especially if you have a person with a disability that moved to the area and they aren't sure what kind of mobility they're going to have or how to get around in the town. This would be a good service for them, as well as seniors or maybe more aging populations that suddenly have a change in their mobility and they can no longer drive or use traditional fixed routes. So those are some kind of examples there. One of the other eligibility components is people that live in North Liberty or rural areas, or unincorporated as we call them, that don't have transportation access. So North Liberty is a hot spot in our community. It's growing, and they've done some internal transportation programs there with the North Liberty Transportation Assistance Program. But unfortunately, that program isn't able to extend transportation access as much as the same day can. So that's another hot spot for eligibility. The next one on the list is going to be limited English proficiency or immigrants. And then the very last but not least is any other individual experiencing a transportation barrier. So as service providers here in the room, if you're not sure if those that you're serving meet any of this eligibility criteria, we're always open to having that discussion. And there has been some that do follow in that category that you wouldn't necessarily think of in those first four, but they are having a transportation barrier, and we're happy to consider them for eligibility. So that's who we're serving. So kind of a lot of different populations there. And as I mentioned, Dawn and I are always here to help answer questions. So what's a lot different about this service than others that you might be familiar with is it does require a referral. So the referrals are going to come from an agency, and anybody here in the training today, and probably a lot more out there, are authorized to make that referral. It is a one-time referral. I have up here on the screen 2 different ways to submit that. The first on the left-hand side there is our website, which Dawn was referencing, johnsoncountyiowa.gov/same day. So underneath of that is a very quick and easy direct way to submit a referral. It's about a dozen pages less than the actual paratransit application. So again, if you worked with those, we've cut out a lot of that stuff and just stuck with the basics. If you ever do need to print or you would rather do a fillable PDF, I have a screenshot of that here on the right-hand side of the screen. As you can see, it's very basic information. There are a few markers that we have to ask, and that's because of our funding source, which we'll get into a little bit more as we go on. This process is just a one-time, and the reason that we allow service providers, such as those of you in this room, to make this determination is because if we go back to that eligibility, you've already created a relationship with that client and you're likely to know which item they're getting, which basis they're eligible for. But that's not always the case. And I am here to pick up anybody that you're not quite sure about, and I can work with them directly on that. So we trust you guys as local providers to make the determination on, okay, I think this connects with some of the different markers that Kelly was mentioning. We can go ahead and submit that referral. Okay, so let's talk about what happens next. And I think I see something in chat. Perfect, Leslie. Yes, we definitely will get to that question. And I think it's going to come up here pretty soon in this next session.
I'm just going to interject quickly about the form. If you have an individual who for some reason doesn't feel comfortable answering one of those questions, that is okay. Like, we understand there might be individuals who feel uncomfortable answering specific questions. Just an FYI, it's not, we really want to have this information, but it's not required for them to be able to use the service.
Perfect. Thanks for sending that in.
I wasn't sure if that was in there later. So
I think so. We cover a lot. So let's keep moving along. So this section will be on referrals, and we'll go ahead and get into the question. So first question is, how do I make a referral? And for that question, the answer is going to be submit either one of those forms that we just showed on the previous slide. The PDF, again, is fillable. You can also print it and scan it in if you prefer. The email, once you have that completed, you need to email it to the SEATS ARPA team with the email address there. Or if you have that access, you can submit it directly online, which will automatically send it to our team for review. I think a good chunk of you, especially Voc Rehab, is on our approved provider list. If you're not on that list, we can add you, and it's super easy. So I know DVIP's here, and we just got them added recently. We want to be able to make note of the different agencies that can make the providers. And if your name is not on that provider list that we have, it's pretty simple to add that. So just let our SEATS ARPA team know at the email address.
And we do specify on the webpage that people should only contact you if they have a working relationship with you. So you won't have random people reaching out to you. If anyone doesn't have a working relationship, we're happy to make a referral for them.
Yes, and I will take all the random people. So that is what I fill in the gap for that. So anybody that's not working with you, I can take that on. Okay, so Leslie, I think this should cover your question here. So what is the referral process like after a referral is made, and how long does it take for an individual to get approved? Okay, so first question, once that referral is sent in, whether that's the automatic form or by email, you'll receive a confirmation. So that confirmation will come to you most likely by email. It can also be phone call. And within that, we will let you know whether or not that person is approved. Upon that confirmation, the person that you're referring can immediately start booking rides. And again, those rides are scheduled directly with the driver. The driver has a cell phone, and it's a couple of different drivers depending on the day of the week. That cell phone number is 319-381-2658, and you'll see that up several different times.
It's also on the form itself.
What's that?
It's also on the form itself.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Yes. So the referral form, you'll find that phone number. Okay, so how long does that take? Generally, if you're sending this in between the 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday timeframe, our team of 4 individuals that are reviewing the applications typically get back to you within an hour. This is meant to be an on-demand service. So if you're sending in a referral and you don't have an answer from us, or that you don't have an hour to wait, you can call the director automatically and say, okay, this is Raquel and I'm from Voc Rehab. We have an automatic ride need, and this is what it is. And the driver is trained to discuss that with you and see if they can fit that into the schedule. So hopefully that will answer your
Likely,
question. And then what's the next one?
most likely what would happen is the driver would call a seats supervisor and ask if it was okay, and we would say yes. So they might have to call you back, but you can always call them. You could also just call the seats office
Perfect.
at our main line. And
Yes. And then does Leslie asked the question, does the confirmation come to the referring agency or to the individual? So to answer that, that would go to the referring agency. If you specified in your referral, we could contact the rider directly, but ideally, we kind of visualize you already working with them, or maybe they're there in person or plan to return. You would provide that notice. But if you have a specific arrangement, we can definitely accommodate that, no problem.
you could just write it like there's a section on the form where it says either the rider contact or the referring provider section. Just write, please contact the rider if and when they're approved, if that's.
Yeah, we would definitely be able to see that note. So we're definitely working pretty quickly as long as they come during those normal business hours. Okay, perfect. Let's keep moving along here. So this is kind of a double question. What if there is an urgent referral and we do not hear back from the seats team? So maybe Monday was a perfect example. The county recognizes President's Day as a holiday. So none of us were working on Monday, nor was the on-demand service operating. So let's say it isn't a holiday and you, again, have that urgent ride need. Agencies would be able to call the driver's cell phone on behalf of the rider and explain that trip need, and then work to get that referral form submitted as soon as possible. So next question is, how long is a rider approved for? So this is kind of complicated. I do want to start by saying that, so the project started this last summer and we have secured funding until mid-2025. So if you're doing the math on that, we're about 2 years out. Most people are generally qualified for the duration of the project. Some exceptions would be North Liberty residents. They may not lose their service, but they'll just have to renew. And that's mainly to ensure that they're still living in North Liberty, as the city of North Liberty is helping pay for the service of their residents. The paratransit riders, if any of you, again, have ever been through that paratransit process, sometimes the transit systems do take that full 21 days. Recently, it's gone quite a bit faster. So once that person does transition to full-blown seats paratransit, they won't need the on-demand service anymore. So we are by default giving them 3 months, and that's been more than enough time so far. But if for some reason and there was an appeal or it did take longer, we can again revisit that. If there is an end date on their approval, we will communicate that with the rider. Okay. And I think there's something in the chat. I'm in North Liberty. Do we get a notice if the individual is close to their end date? Dawn, I need help with that question. Are we also notifying the referring provider?
So what we've been doing is, and this is kind of new because North Liberty, it's basically what's happening is if you're referring somebody who's a resident of North Liberty, we're going to immediately let them ride. But then we're going to tell you, we want you to check in with the special projects coordinator at North Liberty, Angela. And for most people, she wants them to apply for North Liberty's transportation assistance program, because that covers specific needs, and it's less costly than this. So what I've been doing is when they expire, I notify North Liberty. Usually she's already talked to them and it's taken care of. If it wasn't, then we would reach out to either you or the rider.
Yeah, I think we can definitely accommodate that, especially Leslie, I think you're from the pantry, so I imagine you're kind of seeing these riders on a regular basis. So I think that would be an easy accommodation that we could consider.
And we aren't going to suddenly cut them off. So we've had it come up recently where due to just administrative time being, managed by like the person from North Liberty was off and busy and couldn't get to things. So we just let them continue riding. We're not going to suddenly cut somebody off.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And this is a service designed to address barriers, not create them. So we really want to be mindful of that. And what we've realized with most of the North Liberty residents that are currently using the service, they're using both the North Liberty Transportation Assistant Program and the same day. So they have a whole menu of options there to work with. Okay.
I have a quick question. I thought it'd be easier than
yeah, please go
chatting
right
it in. This is Leslie from the pantry. So you had kind of said that if we refer people, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. If I refer someone for this program, before they can get approved for this program, they're getting referred to Angela to look into that program first, or did I misunderstand that?
No. So what's happening is we're immediately approving them for this program if we think they qualify. And if they're a resident in North Liberty, it's pretty much a given that we'll transport them. Then we would contact you and say, hey, this person is a resident of North Liberty. We'd include Angela McConville from the city of North Liberty on that email. And then we let them ride a month to 3 months, depending on how long it takes Angela to get in touch with them. If they're already signed up for the North Liberty Transportation Assistance Program, then it's a non-issue. North Liberty is just contributing to that cost, so they want to make sure that they're using their program if they can. And also some people just don't know about it, so it's also making sure they know what's available to them.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like, oh, hey, I'm referring you, but then you have to do like 12 other steps, since this program just sounds so easy. And like you said, you're trying to not create more barriers. And sometimes I know that can be, a lot of our families maybe don't have their own cell phone or don't have different ways to like reach out. And so I just wanted to make sure that if I was signing them up for this, it wasn't like, then it was going to send them down this rabbit hole of having to talk to 12 other people and then get frustrated and just give up on trying to get the help. So I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, so they would immediately qualify for that. For this, the expectation would be that they would also, apply for the North Liberty program. But if we've got specific scenarios where there's a reason they're not, we can work with people. We don't want this to be a barrier. The main issue we had when we set this up was there's certain information we need in order to get the funding, which I'm sure most of you guys can relate to. And the easiest way seemed to be to do that just one time to get that information. So, and then I think for North Liberty, as far as like kind of renewing them after that year, it's just a matter of them confirming they're still a resident. They were only worried if someone moved out of North Liberty, then they don't want to pay, for part of that person's services. So
understandable. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is some good discussion. Thank you guys for taking that. Okay, so we're going to transition to booking, but before we get into actually booking the ride, is there any other questions about the referral process, that one-time referral process? You're welcome to do chat or just start talking. Okay, we will keep going along. Again, for the booking, we talked about Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. anywhere within Johnson County. Again, those rides are booked directly with the driver. So we'll get into the specifics of actually booking that ride. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is what if the rider doesn't speak English? So if you remember back to the eligibility, one of the criteria or the eligibility components is if somebody has limited English proficiency. So with respect to the individual, we want to make sure that we can communicate with them, and we do have interpretation available. I will say that we can, the driver can connect with the formal language link, which is like a third party. I'm sure some of you have probably used before. It is kind of a timely process. So we also encourage those that don't speak English to text the driver, and that is a perfectly fine, okay, way to communicate the rides, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. But with the texting, that will allow the driver to use Google Translate and the rider to use Google Translate. With the language line or the language link, it's possible that the driver may have to call the person back while they actually get the interpretation on the line. So to keep it seamless, if the person is able to, text would be preferred, but of course we do have that formal service if needed.
And please make sure to let us know on the form what their preferred language is if you have someone with limited English proficiency, so that they know when the person's calling. That's the negative of the interpretation, is if they call and they don't recognize the language, it gets challenging. So
That is a good point, and we do keep a note on that person's profile, what language that is, so that we can, have that ease of translation when needed. Okay, so we talked about this being a same day on demand service. So the question is, how soon in advance do I need to make a ride request? And the answer to that question is rides are booked the day of the trip need, and it is done in a first come, first serve order. And that is because we only have one driver and one vehicle. So when a rider first learns that they have a travel need that they need to travel to, they would want to make that ride request as soon as possible. The drivers do start their shift at 7 a.m. So there is that 30 minutes before they start the pickups that they can start taking the ride request. If somebody texted or called in the middle of the night for the ride, that would not be responded to. So it's not until 7 a.m. And then how soon after a ride request will the driver arrive? And there's a lot of varying factors in here. There may be a case where if a driver is out in North Liberty and the next person that calls is in North Liberty, they can be there with less than 10 minutes. But if they're driving from North Liberty to Southeast Iowa City, that's going to take quite a bit longer. So the drivers will be able to communicate that with you at the time of your booking, if they're going to be available for that designated time, or if there's going to need to be some negotiation. But again, if the people you're serving have scheduled needs, or like a doctor's appointment or employment that they're traveling to, it is good for them to make that request to first thing in the morning at 7 a.m. Okay. Can a ride be made in advance for a medical appointment? So at this point, all the trips, again, are made the day of the trip. So if somebody has a medical appointment that they're traveling to, they can make that reservation as early as 7 a.m. So anything outside of 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. will not be responded to. And next question is, we are a referring provider. Do we still need to fill out the referral form? So the answer to this is yes. Each rider needs a referral form, and again, that's just one time. And Dawn's kind of talked about who we report this information to, and that's going to be the Department of Treasury. So the questions on the form are directly related to the information that they need. Oh, okay. And sorry, I got distracted. I'm going to read that question out loud. Question was, if the rider calls and the line is busy, is it best for them to leave a message or should they call until they get through? John replied, they should leave a message and the driver will call back as soon as possible. So it is a cell phone too. So, you know, I imagine it's just directed to the voicemail in the event that there's no answer.
Yeah, so it would go to voicemail and the voicemail says the information that they want, but it is helpful when the rider leaves a message if they say who they are, where they're going, where they want to be picked up and dropped off and what time, because that way the driver can call them back and have full information. So
That's perfect. Yes. And I think that, Donna, I know that the limited English proficiency populations are doing a lot of texting, but
Mhm.
are other writers too?
Yeah, we have a lot of riders are texting. Yep.
Yeah.
Both limited
So
and
yeah,
just
so that gets into our next question. Can you make a ride request by text? And absolutely. So the details that you need to provide is your name, your pickup address, where you're going, the address there, and the desired pickup time. Important thing here is to make sure that the driver responds back with that confirmation. So if you don't get your confirmation, you're going to need to make sure that you double check it. And that leads us into the next question is, what if I made a ride request and I did not hear back from the driver? So we put a buffer that it could take about 30 minutes for a driver to respond. And that's again, in that case that if they're making a long trip and they can't safely respond to the phone call or text. If that does happen or you're not hearing back from them, this is a great time to utilize the SEATS main line, which is 339-6128, and ask to speak to a SEATS supervisor.
they do have the vehicle that they drive has Bluetooth, but they can only
Nice.
answer the phone with one touch. So if they know the person doesn't speak English and is going to need an interpreter, then a lot of times they won't answer because they know they're going to have to call back through the interpreter, and that's not a one-touch phone call over the radio. They might also not answer if they have people on the bus or on the vehicle. So
Great. Okay, that wraps up the booking section. Any questions about booking the rides? Okay, doesn't look like it. We will get into the fare. So the price of the service is $5, and that is a one-way fare. So exact change required. The answer is yes. Exact change or exact fare is required at the time of you board. I'm not sure if any of the agencies on today, but have taken advantage of this, but agencies are allowed to purchase tickets that they then distribute to the riders that they're referring. That answers the question right next to this is yes, you can purchase and distribute tickets at your discretion. And if you contact Dawn, she can get you set up with that. Can we pay after the driver drops off a rider? And I'm imagining this happens quite a bit in our office. Maybe this has happened to yours too. Sometimes people will get a ride to our place of business and then not have a ride home. And we're like, okay, how are we going to scramble to do this? So that would be an example where if you can quickly get that referral form done, and then we can get that person approved in time, that's great. If not, that's a situation where we could potentially call the driver and see if they're available to help. If you need to pay on behalf of the rider, you could use that pre-purchase ticket to do that. Or if you had the cash available, you could pay on that person's behalf. Or in a vice versa trip where, let's say you have essential services you're providing to somebody and they need to get to your place of business, but they don't have that $5, you could pay the driver upon arrival.
So the only thing we would have there is if let's say someone was coming to you to seek services, you knew they were going to call, they were already referred, you were going to cover the cost, but you couldn't get the ticket or the fare to them in advance. We'll collect it when we get there, but I would want you guys to reach out to the driver and let them know. We wouldn't want riders just saying, oh, they're going to pay when I get here. We actually would want to hear that from you. Even a text would be fine.
Right. I think, yeah, the key is for them to know ahead of time, because otherwise the drivers will be trained to collect the fare when the person boards. So.
Yeah. So if someone from your agency didn't contact the driver saying that you had a ticket you were going to give them when the rider got there, the driver wouldn't transport them. So you'd want to make sure they knew that.
All righty. So that's the last question about fares. I will take a quick pause for any questions. Okay, so now we will get into guests and children. Are minors available or able to use the service? The answer there is yes. Minors can ride as a guest, and they would be expected to pay the $5 fare. If the person is a minor and they're the actual person that you're referring, if they're under age 7, they would have a guardian that could ride with them for free.
And we would actually require a guardian to ride with someone under the age of 7.
Yes, required. Sorry, I should have said that.
That's okay.
Okay. And then we have with the children riding, they would need to provide the parent or the guardian riding with them would need to provide the car seat. The drivers are not trained to install those, so it would be up to the guardian or parent to install that safety seat. Okay, can you bring a friend or a guest with you? Answer to that is yes, you can. The minivan that we're currently using is a little bit tight, so you need to make sure that you're communicating that at the booking. And the guest or friend that's riding with you would also pay that $5 fare. Next question. Can a person with a disability bring an attendant? So the phrase attendant is very specific to that paratransit aspect, because when you're riding as a person with a disability, you can have requests that an attendant ride with you for free during the application process. The same day on demand service, as we mentioned, is quite a bit different. So attendants are really just guests in this case, and they would be paying the $5 fare as well. And then we have the note here that if a rider does require an attendant, it's likely that they would need to pursue the SEATS paratransit service, as it will better meet their needs. And Leslie put a question in the chat about service animals or animals in general. John, that's all you. I don't know how to answer that.
A good question. So yeah, of course, we allow service animals. There's no documentation or anything required. Our drivers are trained to just ask, is this a service animal? If the person says yes, we leave it. The service animal does have to be under the control of the rider. So if the service animal was jumping up on people or barking really loud and the driver couldn't hear, something like that, then we're getting into potential safety issue. Animals in general, so SEATS policy, and this is what we would follow for this policy, is that an animal can ride if it is in a carrier and can sit on the person's, essentially on the person's lap. So if you had a small cat carrier, yes. If it's a big dog, no, we will not take them unless they're a service animal. And we consider comfort animals, not service animals. Service animals is a very specific thing. Or emotional support animals, same thing.
Thank you, Don.
Yep.
Okay, so any more questions?
So I'm also understanding maybe through, since it's a minivan, that like it could be like multiple people being like kind of picked up. So if there's like 3 people that have scheduled a pickup that are kind of in the same area in North Liberty that are going to different places in Coralville, the driver would potentially like be picking those people up along the way and dropping people off. So it's kind of like a bus in the sense of other riders could be on there with you. It's not just like a taxi where it's just you and the driver. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. So we call that shared ride service. And I will say that right now, what we're using is a minivan. We're procuring an electric bus as part of this project that has a much larger capacity than the van does. It's like the size of a Seats bus. We did not want to wait on that because we all know right now the world we live in, there's shortages of everything, and vehicles, and specifically the vehicles we drive are really delayed getting to us. Coralville Transit's been waiting like a year for a bus. So we had a minivan that we had gotten at the start of the pandemic that we weren't really using a lot for seats because it wasn't no longer meeting our needs. So just so that we could start this program, we started out using the minivan, but we will be getting a bus that has larger space capacity.
So I jumped to the end here to show you a picture of what the current minivan looks like. And just kind of a spoiler alert, this is accessible, and that ramp is in the center of the van, or the back door from the passenger. So with that being accessible, you lose some extra seats. So if you think about a minivan that doesn't have that accessibility feature, you can fit like 7 people. Not quite the case with this, but yes, as Dawn did mention, it is possible that you would have others riding with you.
And they have had
shared.
I think the space right now is basically 3 people can fit in there. So, okay. And just to answer it, there was a question in the chat that I typed out the answer, but it was, will clients be picked up to be taken home, and will that be another $5? So yes, if they need a ride home, they can ask the driver when they book that ride going somewhere. They could also book the return. Sometimes if it's a medical appointment, the driver will encourage them just to call, because if they don't know when they're going to be done, they don't want to go show up for them and wait and they're not there. And then it's $5 each way.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll keep that pause going for any other questions, chat or verbal. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. We're going to talk about service interruptions. So that's just kind of a fact of life here for transportation in the Midwest. So starting with weather interruption. So what if there is bad weather? How do I know if the same day on-demand service is in operation? So to answer that question, the service would be announced on KCRG and then all of the county social media accounts. If somebody doesn't have access to either of those platforms, they can also call or text the driver between that 7 to 5 time and ask them about the service operation. So what if you miss your ride? So luckily this hasn't happened yet, right, Dawn?
Oh, I'm sure somebody's missed their ride. It's not a problem.
Okay,
No.
Good. So most people that need this service are have been able to catch it. So if you do miss your ride, this would be a sample where you'd want to contact the driver and see if there's any way that they can get you rescheduled. There's no promises that they can make there. And if that does become a habitual problem there, that could result in loss of service. But right now it's been going pretty well. Okay, so what if the same day on-demand service is unable to fulfill my ride request? So luckily, majority of the rides have been fulfilled at this point. I think there's just very few that could have not been accommodated, but I am happy to discuss alternative options with anybody that can't get their ride fulfilled. and some of the options that we can consider, and it's going to be based on where the person lives, where they're traveling to, some of their demographics, whether or not they need an accessible ride, if it's medical, if they're a senior, there's all kinds of factors to weigh in there. But some of the options that we could consider would be an accessible transportation business if somebody needed that level, local transportation services that are private pay, such as CPS or Audemars. Then we also have public transit. So I'm always an advocate for that and can provide education to people if that's something they would like to consider using, if it works for them in that case. Then we also have different senior transportation programs, as I mentioned, and then of course, taxi, Uber, and Lyft. And we just got another question in the chat, which says, when agencies purchase tickets, do we get a discount buying tickets in bulk, or is it still $5 per ticket no matter what?
Yeah, so there is unfortunately there's no discount. The main reason we did the tickets was because we knew that there were going to be agencies that wanted to cover the fare for the riders. And billing them was just way too complicated and big of an administrative task for us to absorb. But yeah, good try.
Yeah, I like that too. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we are getting really close. I understand if anybody needs to take off to a 2 o'clock, but we're getting pretty close. So then we just kind of have other things that didn't fit into the other category. So I have a picture of the ramp, and this is yesterday, so you can see why it looks in the condition it does if you were out and about yesterday. So this would make a seamless no step entry for anybody that wanted it. Wheelchairs are what it's mainly intended for, but if somebody wanted that ramp, they could by all means make that request.
I don't know if this is in here, but this actually just came up yesterday or the day before. If you have an individual that uses a large wheelchair, make sure to put that in the referral form, because large wheelchairs don't always fit well in the van. It's actually difficult for them to get forward facing, and we won't transport them sideways facing. So if it is someone that has an oversized chair, we do have a backup, like regular seats bus that the driver can take. So if they tell the driver, I have an oversized chair, the driver will make sure to take the bus that morning so that they can accommodate that ride. We just need to know in advance.
That's a good addition. Thanks for adding that, Don.
Yeah.
Okay, so first question is, can I bring my groceries on the van? So the answer is yes, as long as that item, grocery or whatever it is that you're carrying on, is not too large or awkward or complicated for the driver to carry by themselves. In terms of bags, grocery bags can be about 8 bags or a total of 20 pounds. Next question. I have a wheelchair. Is the van accessible? So spoiler alert, you already saw that. Yes, it is accessible. And because these are paratransit drivers, they have the best training ever to accommodate those different mobility devices. Okay, and now we just have open-ended questions. So if something wasn't fit into those questions before or came up now, we will open the floor and allow people to ask. Okay, apparently we nailed all of the main questions, which is good. If stuff comes up later, of course, you can contact Dawn or I. Oh, somebody was typing. I didn't give them enough time.
Did I ask them for everyone?
Okay, good. Thank you, Leslie. I'm the same way. I need to ask right away or it's not going to get asked. So we have our email and our website up here. We hope that you found this presentation helpful. I'm going to end the share and end the